Thank you very much. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Thompson Regional Hospital District for this, the 24th day of March 2022 to order. We are pleased to be joined today by alternate director Andrea Inwards, representing David Laird, alternate director Bill Sarai, representing director Bass, alternate director Lee Morris, representing director Rothenberger, and I believe alternate director Dennis Walsh, representing Director O'Reilly. I haven't seen him on the line yet, but I'm sure he will join. And just an announcement, we are on a hard stop at 11:30 today, and we will be picked up in a bus out front, and we will be transported to Royal Inland Hospital for a brief meeting with Minister Dix, who will be there this morning. And we look forward to that, and then we'll be shuttled back in time for the Thompson-Nicola Regional District regular meeting at 1:30 this afternoon. I would like to acknowledge that the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, we connect with many First Nations communities across the vast region. And today we are located on the traditional territory of the Tecumloops Teshekweppem in Secwepemc Ulu. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Tecumloops Teshekweppem and respect the territory and land upon which we gather today. At item 2, I want to call on the acting corporate secretary for an update on the election process. Agnes.
Thank you, Chair Christian. As there are only 2 meetings left before the general local elections in October, and given that in June, staff plans to bring forward proposed changes to the hospital district procedure bylaw, which would include a recommendation to move the chair and acting chair elections from March to November so that they align with the November inaugural elections for the TNRD board. Staff at this time would recommend giving the hospital district the option of retaining the current chair and acting chair for the next 2 meetings.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to defer.
So moved.
Moved by Director Stamer and seconded by Director Gillis. Discussion, please. Seeing none, I'll call the question on that motion. All of those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And on behalf of Acting Chair Elliott and myself, thank you for your confidence, and we will continue to work hard until the November date. Additions or deletions from the agenda, please. Seeing none, I'll call the question on the agenda as circulated. All of those in favor, those opposed, that is carried as well. You have before you the minutes of the Thompson Regional Hospital District meeting of November the 18th. How say you?
So moved.
Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Kershaw. Were there any errors or omissions? Hearing none, I'll call the question on those minutes. All of those in favor, those opposed, that is carried. And now we're pleased to welcome finally, Director Watson, after your recommendation, Dr. Elizabeth Ewart from the Ray Fawcett Breast Health Clinic at Royal Inland Hospital. Dr. Ewart.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Liz Ewart. I'm a GP that works here at the hospital. I work at the Ray Fawcett Breast Clinic, and I also work at the Cancer Clinic. And I was asked to do a presentation on the Ray Fawcett Breast Clinic. So I've got some slides. I'm going to try and share them with you here now. Can you guys see this? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Ewart,
Okay.
but no slides yet.
No slides. Okay, hold on. Let me try this again. Oh, I have to share. Okay, I see. Sorry, I'm not great with this. Share screen. Can you see these slides?
Not yet. And there we go. We got
There
them.
we go. Okay, got it. Bear with me here. All right, so here we are. So we're going to talk about the Ray Fawcett Breast Health Clinic. So what I wanted to talk about today was just why the clinic was established. We'll discuss the mandate of the clinic. We'll review the services the clinic offers, review some statistics, and then some feedback from the community. So I think when we're talking about the clinic, it's really important to know what breast cancer statistics are like in Canada. Breast cancer is really common, as most people probably know. 1 in 8 women are going to have breast cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 28 women will die from breast cancer. It is the most common cancer in Canadian women and the second leading cause of death in women in Canada. But what I think is really important to know is that 50% of women will go through a breast cancer scare in their lifetime, whether it's an abnormal screening mammogram or a lump in their breast or some kind of symptom. So 50% of women go through this breast cancer diagnosis system at some point in their life. In Kamloops, approximately 150 women are diagnosed with breast cancer every year. And in BC, we have great survival rates. For women who are diagnosed with a localized breast cancer confined to the breast, the 5-year survival rate is 99%. And if it's involving the lymph nodes, the 5-year survival rate is 88%. This is why mammograms save lives, because it catches things before symptoms develop. So the Ray Fawcett Breast Health Clinic was established to try to streamline care for patients with new breast concerns. And the reason it was initiated was in 2012, the BC Provincial Breast Health Strategy made a target wait time of 28 days from referral to diagnosis. So this means that when a woman presents with a breast cancer concern to the time that she's diagnosed with breast cancer, they suggested it should not take longer than 28 days. And at that time in Kamloops, only about 35% of our breast cancer patients were in that target wait time. And in fact, in Europe, they suggested that wait time should be even shorter. It should be 21 days. So through community fundraisers and private donations and lots of meetings, we were able to establish the clinic, and we opened in 2017. The clinic's open at the hospital through the clinical services building. We're staffed by a nurse, an MOA, and 5 family doctors that have interest in breast cancer and breast disease. And we're open 3 days a week plus every second Monday, and that's our contacts. So our mandate was to provide all patients in our region with high quality coordinated breast diagnostic services. And we wanted to streamline the breast cancer diagnostic system by making it more efficient and easier to navigate and better supported. We also wanted to ensure that all of our patients were meeting those target wait times that we had mentioned previously. And we certainly also wanted to support patients who had new breast concerns who did not have a family doctor or a primary care provider, because as we know, there is about 1/3 of our population now doesn't have anyone to help them navigate through these kind of processes. So the services we provided, the initial service we really wanted to provide was what's called a triple assessment in 1 day. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. But we provide a lot of other services as well, including risk assessment, risk reduction. We do a lot of treatment of benign breast disease. We can prescribe endocrine therapy for people who are at high risk for breast cancer to reduce their risk. We do a lot of breast density discussions, supplemental screenings, assessments and referrals for hereditary cancer testing. We certainly do lots of education on new breast cancer diagnosis, and we make appropriate referrals to surgery and oncology if required. So what a triple assessment in 1 day is that when a patient comes in with their new breast concern, they're seen by a clinic nurse and physician, they get a history and an exam done. Then they have their diagnostic breast imaging, whether or not it's a mammogram and an ultrasound. Then they come back to the clinic and they get the results of their imaging. And if they require a biopsy, we can offer that on the same day. And then we make all the appropriate follow-up. So when you compare that to what used to happen, the top graph shows what used to happen. A patient would present with a breast concern. They would be referred for imaging. Then they'd have to make another appointment to see their primary care provider. Then they'd have to make another appointment for a biopsy. And then they would make an appointment for their diagnosis. And what we're doing is we're condensing those 3 appointments into 1 by doing that triple assessment in 1 day. And that's how we aim to reduce our wait times. In addition to doing that, we have a multitude of handouts at the clinic that we've made for patients. I won't go through them all. But if a patient is diagnosed with breast cancer after they have their biopsy, they're seen in person at the clinic by the physician. We go over their pathology report. We discuss further treatments that may be offered or required. They're given a handout that we've made, plus a bunch of information from the Canadian Cancer Society. We make sure that appropriate referrals are made to the surgeons and oncologists. And of course, we always ensure that patients are being communicated, or our communications are with their primary care providers, and we involve them in the decision-making too. This is an example of the what we give patients with a new breast cancer diagnosis. We have our own patient guide there. We have information from the Canadian Cancer Society. And then our volunteers make these lovely little cushions for patients as well that they can use after their surgeries. In terms of the referral process, we get referrals from two sources. So if anyone it goes to the screening mammogram clinic and has an abnormal screen, they're referred directly to our clinic. We also get referrals from our community providers, so our nurse practitioners and family physicians, for patients who have a new concern, whether or not it's a lump, nipple discharge, breast pain, any new breast concerns. In terms of our statistics, in 2021, the average number of new patients that we saw per month were 125. 62% came from the screening clinic, about 38% came from primary care providers. We also follow patients who have, concerns that require follow-up. So we see about 160 patients a month in follow-up. In 2021, we had 113 new breast cancers diagnosed through our clinic, so an average of 9 to 10 breast cancers a month. Prior to the clinic establishment, 35% of patients received their breast diagnosis within 4 weeks from presentation. Now about 82, almost 82% are receiving that diagnosis. So we've definitely improved wait times. We're not quite at our target of having everyone meet that diagnosis in 4 weeks, but we certainly have made improvements in the community. And I will say that we probably have one of the best rates in British Columbia now. In 2018, just after we opened, we did a patient satisfaction survey. Over 80% of patients thought that the clinic provided excellent service. 11% said it was very good, 5% good, and 2.78%, which was actually one patient, wasn't happy with the service. We get a lot of really positive feedback from patients. They really do appreciate the clinic. I like the middle one where patients said, I like the concept of multiple steps in one visit. I live out of town, and one visit was so much more accessible for me. And it really has been helpful for those patients who live out of town, not having to travel back and forth multiple times to get a breast cancer diagnosis, which is stressful and also very expensive for them. We also did a survey on primary care provider feedback. 29 of the 31 respondents were happy and satisfied with care. 2 respondents were concerned about the care, mostly because they were worried about it causing fragmentation or eroding continuity of care with their primary care provider. But the majority of patients were really happy with the care. The last comment was from a physician who said patients are happy, and myself as a physician, I'm happy. I see the clinic as a community resource to provide consistent practice for patients without a family doctor, and to augment care with existing family physicians, not replace them. So again, we've had really good feedback from our colleagues. The radiologists are quite happy with the clinic because they find that patients are more at ease when they're having their diagnostic imaging, because they know they're going to get results right away rather than having to wait for the results. And so they've noted that there's fewer questions directed at the techs. And our surgeons, we work very closely with our surgeons and our oncologists and radiologists, and the surgeons again are very happy with the care. One of the feedback we got from them is they said because of the information given to a newly diagnosed breast cancer patient at the clinic, patients often seem better prepared for their surgical consultation, usually have a lot of good questions, and seem less overwhelmed. So in conclusion, our mandate is to provide all patients in our region with high quality, coordinated, efficient, supportive breast cancer diagnostic system. And we expedite breast cancer investigations through a triple assessment in 1 day. But our clinic also offers lots of other services, including breast cancer counseling and treatment and education around lots of benign breast disease. So we're certainly always open to feedback. The clinic is still a work in process. We're always trying to improve things through quality improvement projects. We're open to any questions or concerns. And we certainly want to thank those who made the clinic possible, including Ray and Ron Fawcett, community fundraisers, private donations, the foundation, coordinated with some diagnostic services, our radiologists, surgeons, pathologists, the shared care and divisions of family practice, and of course, IHA. So if there's any questions, I'm very happy to address them. Hopefully I provided information that you find useful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ewart. Appreciate your time this morning and the comprehensive slide deck you provided. Director Watson.
Thank you, Dr. Ewart, for your presentation and the work you do. I became aware of your clinic through a friend who has breast cancer. So this is very good information for me. I do have a couple of questions. So
Certainly.
first of all, what is a primary care provider?
Oh, I'm sorry. So a primary care provider is either a family doctor or a nurse practitioner.
And you said earlier that a third of the people in BC don't have a family doctor or a nurse practitioner of their own, and worse in the hinterland. And that is concerning because there's no one to work with if you don't have your own doctor. Your region is the Thompson-Nicola region, or
That's
is it
right.
the Kamloops region?
Thompson-Nicola.
I hate to tell you that the word of the Ray Fawcett Breast Health Clinic has not reached the entire region. There are many, many doctors who have never heard of this. And I keep on talking about it. So I am trying to get everybody to know about it. But there is a lot of no information out there. I know that the mammogram trailers that go around they do not say anything about the Ray Fawcett Breast Health Clinic. And there's little information in them. And I'd really like to improve that. And I'd really like it if we could replicate the Ray Fawcett Breast Health Clinic in other hospital districts. So I hope we can all work together on getting the good work you're doing out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, we try to work closely with the screening mobile clinic. It's a provincial entity. It's not through IHA. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. But, you know, certainly I'll make some comments and see if we can get more information out to our surrounding communities.
Further to Director Watson's point, your slide deck, that will be made available to our directors so that they could promote this within their constituencies. Good.
Sure. We might
Right.
need more funding at our clinic for more staff, I'm not sure.
Well, we need the people to know about it first. Director Quinn.
Thank you. I think my question may have been answered, but I'll ask it anyway. Are there still the mammograms that go around to rural communities in a van? Is that still in place? Thank you.
Thank you. And just a final question from myself. What about incidents of breast cancer in men?
Yeah, we do see men at the clinic. Breast cancer in men is quite rare. You don't see it nearly as common. So it's, you know, like 1 in 200. But we have definitely seen men, and men are referred to the clinic with a new breast lump. We don't obviously do screening in men, particularly men who have a family history of a BRCA or a genetic mutation are at higher risk. But yeah, we do definitely see men at the clinic as well.
Right. Well, oh, Director Rain has one last question.
Yeah, just going to ask, you said, I think it said something like 82% are seen within 4 weeks. What's keeping the 20% away?
So it's really just getting them into imaging. Some people choose to wait, you know, they have a holiday booked or they don't want to come in. We definitely have patients, we offer a same-day ultrasound guided biopsy and they are too overwhelmed and they want to wait for that. So sometimes it's patient choice, but again, it really is just trying to deal with the volume of patients that we're seeing. So, you know, we don't always meet those targets. Machines might be down. You know, our stereotactic biopsy machine was down for a while. That delayed things. So there's lots of holes in that Swiss cheese model that can happen still.
Dr. Ewart, on behalf of the Regional Hospital District, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I want to thank you and your team for the work that you do to identify and treat breast cancer within our region. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving to item 5.2, it's my pleasure to invite Tracy Raney, the Executive Director of Royal Inland Hospital. And Tracy, we're all going to jump on a bus and come up and see you in a few hours. So the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure that everyone can see our slides.
We've got the slide deck, thanks.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you for that. And yes, you'll be coming to visit, so we're very excited about that. Big day here at Royal Inland Hospital. First, I would also, just to let everyone know, I do have Ian Wood with me today. He's a Director of Clinical Operations for Kamloops Primary Care and Rural Region here, and he's here to support any questions that may come up from Lisa Zanata's portfolio. She's away currently, so we just wanted to have someone available if some questions came up from that area. So thank you, Ian, for joining today. So I wanted to show this slide. Many of you may be aware, we have a new VP of medicine VP of IH North, Diane Sendrick. She started here in November and resides in Kamloops, which we are very excited to have her here locally and on site. As you can see, her portfolio is quite large. She has, of course, Royal Inland in the Kamloops area. She has the Caribou, she has out towards East Kootenay, North Okanagan, and she also oversees our professional practice office, our renal service, and the mental health network as well. So she does have quite an area to cover, and we're very lucky to have her here supporting us. Oops. I just wanted to show that slide. It kind of gives you, just remind everybody, geographically, we're quite large, and just kind of gives you the idea of the span of the areas that Interior Health covers. I did want to talk a little bit about service reductions. Many of you were aware of these. They all started in kind of mid-January. You know, it was really to look at the impact of the Omicron as it kind of came sweeping through. And it was really to mitigate the staff sickness, help, and by reducing the services, we were able to redeploy those staff to those areas that there were sick calls. And so it was impactful to many, but it was definitely successful and supportive for many sites that required additional staff. These impacts were across all of Interior Health. At the peak, many of our sick calls were between 800 to 900 sick calls per day. Good percentage were of COVID-19. It did impact our urgent and emergent surgeries, and locally here, our heart function clinic. Many of the staff that were redeployed was around 4,000 shifts across the region. We had over 250 staff volunteer to be redeployed. Here locally at Royal Inland Hospital, we in 1 month, we had over 130 staff throughout the facility that were redeployed to assist in different areas. What we're happy to announce is as we moved out, we're phasing back to full capacity and services, which is excellent. The OR slates are running, ambulatory care is running, and the heart function clinic is up and back to full function. Access and efficiency. So I know when I spoke in November, we talked a lot about access and efficiency and lots of work that we're going on here at site. You know, we have had some capacity issues. The acute and community teams have been working very hard together. And we did make some gains in January. And like I said, Omicron came to visit and did impact us. And at times, the capacity issues have impacted hospital operations. In January, there were 44 beds opened at Ponderosa for long-term care clients, which helped immensely. And we've had to postpone some surgeries. And while we don't want to postpone anyone's surgeries, we note that many non-urgent surgeries were still being completed even during the service reductions. And I think the other part of access and efficiency is really the human resource. And there continues to be a number of activities in regards to recruitment and retention of staff. We work closely with TRU. They have a number of programs to support many disciplines in healthcare, and we have a great and close relationship with them. We've also have our centralized recruitment is going full speed, hiring of student nurses, especially education and training, float pools, and rotations to help align with staff's requests. Go into this slide a little bit. So the tower. So opening the new Ghilardi Tower marks the beginning of a new era for RAH. It will help us recruit staff, which we know is one of the biggest solutions for some of the staff morale. We also appreciate healthcare workers everywhere and have been through an extremely challenging years. And the team here worked very hard and given exceptional care under difficult circumstances. There's kind of no quick fix for some of these, but we continue to work closely on solutions with many folks. This is a very exciting day. And so phase one gives you a little bit of kind of how it looks like as we move into July. They call it day in the life. And so the staff and the physicians will go into the tower. They'll go to kind of the units that they'll mainly be working on. They get to actually review the unit, how everything works in there, the flow of their work, you know, where the care station is, how to utilize the call system, elevators, and kind of the specifics to each of the units. And then the official move date is July 17th, and we'll be moving patients in, so that's exciting. And then phase two, just to remind everyone, is the post-anesthetic room, pediatrics, emergency department, and the morgue. So there's preliminary work going on that, and then that'll get going once we get the tower open. I wanted to share this photo with you. This is some of our Indigenous partners here locally, and we've been working very closely with the groups here to have a cultural wall. And Chris Bose is an Indigenous artist here, and he's helping us navigate that and bring everyone together. And I'm really excited. We've seen some preliminary drafts of what he's thinking, and it's going to be quite exciting, representing the different cultures here. And so we're excited to see this work come together. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do for retention. This is kind of a neat thing that we, some sites have done, and we've done it here. We all know staff in healthcare have been under a lot of pressure and stress over the last 2 years, and it causes mental fatigue and burnout. We've been looking for creative ways to support staff's overall well-being. And this thing is called, they call it a Wobble Room, and it's a safe space for staff to decompress, debrief, and connect. So we have this up on the 9th floor. It's where staff can go and they can sit quietly, they can share experiences with other staff, read notes of appreciation, meditate quietly, read a book, but really just a quiet space for them to gather their thoughts. This went live in December, and we've received really positive feedback on this space, and a really big thank you to the frontline staff and the RH Foundation that supported the project to kind of come to life. It's really quite beautiful. And I just wanted to share a patient story. Often there's kind of, I'll say, negative stories circulated, but I want to reassure there are more positive experiences that we get shared with us on a regular basis from our patients and families that we serve. This is just one example of one that we were served. It was quite heartwarming and very grateful for the staff and the medical staff here at Royal Inland Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Questions for Tracy Raney, Director Elliott?
Thank you, Tracy, for your presentation, but I have a question about Ponderosa. Right now, I believe it's a rehab. Is that right? Are they just doing rehab in that building?
I think what you'd be referring to is we have what we call short stay beds, and short stay beds are for individuals that need subacute care, but that don't necessarily need long-term care. And the whole trajectory of that course of those patients is to really get them back home. So I'll just use an example. A patient may fall and fracture a hip, so we fix the hip here, and then they're transferred to Ponderosa, mainly for strengthening, and that's where kind of we do have additional rehab resources, occupational therapy to really support those patients to get them back home. So they just need probably a little bit longer stay in a more of a subacute setting. And there is long-term care beds there.
Thank you, but I worry about the fact that that building is so old. And we have not put a lot of effort into upgrading it and whatnot over the years. And I'm wondering if the tower opening will alleviate some of the patients going into Ponderosa.
I do agree the building is old. Do I think it's going to alleviate patients going through Ponderosa? That's really for kind of a different patient population. So the patients that are seen here kind of at Royal Inland, we really try to make sure we're seeing kind of tertiary level acute care patients. Over there is more of our short stay patients, as we call them, so people that are making their way home, and long-term care patients.
Thank you.
Director Schaefer.
Hi, this is more to Mr. Wood there. It's concerning central staffing that went into place May of 21. Now what central staffing does is they send out notice for staff requirement. And if nobody answers, the staffing shortages are then referred back to the hospital to be filled, which puts great stress on the staff at the hospital. And usually it's done quite late and they end up having to shut the hospital down, which Dr. Hamilton has been shut down 3 or 4 times or better. And I was wondering if it is possible to revert back for the small rural areas to having a staff that can do the staffing, because it works a lot better. You don't have the problems, you don't have shutdowns or staff shortages usually. So I'd like to know if that's possible, because it works.
That question's for Ian Wood.
Yes, thank you. So this is something that we did recognize brought forward by not just Clearwater, but other rural sites within the portfolio as an added stress and workload to the local leadership at the site. So it is something that we're looking into changing up a little bit to make things more efficient and make things a little clearer for individuals that are working at the sites, and to also increase some of those vacancies and capturing staff to get to come to work. So this is something that has been highlighted. We're working with the staff at the sites on this, as well as IH leadership, to try to find a solution, and hopefully we'll have something coming soon.
Well, is one of the solutions of bringing back the staffing to the local areas?
One of the solutions is similar to that. It will not, I don't think it will look exactly like it did previously, but it will bring the staffing back into the communities to try to sort out amongst themselves, as opposed to a centralized. Thank you.
Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'm not sure who the question's for, but being from Spence's Bridge, of course, we've lost, most of the people in Spence's Bridge use Lytton as their place to go to see the doctor, and Lytton, of course, in the situation is, and then the cutbacks to Ashcroft has put those folks in a sort of precarious situation. And I do get a lot of inquiries as to sort of what's going on and where we're going from here. There's a lot going on with the rebuild of Lytton and certainly the cutbacks to Ashcroft. And what I would really like to see is more information out there to our community, sort of updates, or however you want to do it. As a real bit on our road, we're getting an update every 2 weeks of when people are going to get to go back home. So the crisis of emergencies like flooding and fires, of course, brings on the mental health issue. And then now we've got an actual physician issue. And I'm just wondering, has there been any efforts? My question is, has there been any efforts to possibly even place a physician in Spence's Bridge or a nurse practitioner or something along those lines. So there is some access to healthcare, at least from the physical standpoint. The mental health is a whole nother ballgame. I get that. And that's another tough nut to crack. But I'm just wondering if anything's going down in my neighborhood that maybe I'm not aware of. Thank you.
That may be a question for Vice President Shendrick, but Ian, did you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a stab at it. So right now, as you mentioned, the focus is on Ashcroft and Lytton rebuild at this time to support those two sites to get services stabilized. And this will surely impact the residents in Spence's Bridge currently. And transparently, I can say that this is not something that we're looking at to put a physician or nurse practitioner in Spence's Bridge, but possibly something we should be highlighting as we move forward with this planning. To try to get something set up there. There is other communities like Clinton is also another community as well that we're looking at. So I'm sure we can add this on to those conversations to see what what we are able to do here. We are of course restricted by recruitment of physicians and nurse practitioners throughout the health authority. It's been a struggle for a very long time, and that is our reality. But to say that this is something we're not going to be looking at, I don't think is a reality. I think this is something we should be looking at and including in our planning as we look at Lytton and Ashcroft rebuild. And just your comment on the communication to your community about where we are in progressing with Ashcroft and Lytton. If there's a way that we could be providing that communication to your community as to where we're at with the planning phases, I'm happy to have an offline conversation as to what might be effective for your community and providing that information.
I've got Director Weeb, then Director Stamer, and then we'll move along. Director Weeb.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And it's nice to see that you're doing recruitment for physicians, nurses, et cetera, et cetera. Long before COVID, fires and floods, I had a wonderful stay at Royal Inland. I have no family here in BC. And I actually felt like a burden for my stay there. Like, I think that we somewhere along the road have forgotten that TLC part of being a hospital. I don't know if you need to bring in more care aides or student nurses to take some of the strain off your RNs. But for people coming from out of town and actually having to stay in a larger hospital and having no family there to help them have a sponge bath or straighten their bed, we were very lacking at Royal Inland for my stay anyway. Thank you.
Tracy, did you have a comment on that?
Sure, just thank you very much for the feedback, and thank you for sharing your concerns. And you're right, we do look at, we need to look at different disciplines to support the care of the patient, and whether it's care aides, sometimes we use porters, sometimes we're looking at a different job description as well, to really how do we support the unit so each discipline can be actually, you know, focusing on the work that they need to do. So I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
And Director Stamer to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question if Ms. Raney and Mr. Wood are going to be sticking around for Mr. Ween's capital request update.
I believe they are. Yeah.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Very good. Well, Tracy, on behalf of the Regional Hospital District, once again, I want to thank you for your very candid update. It's been a very difficult quarter for Royal Inland Hospital. We understand the stress and pressure that you're under, and we hear about it from our constituents. So we're looking forward to better days ahead, and we're also looking forward to seeing you in an hour and a half. So. At item 5.3, Diane Shendrick is with the minister this morning and will not be joining us, but she is committed to the June meeting. We've added that extra meeting in June because it's anticipated that we would have a longer conversation with her. Diane, I have met with her a number of times since she's been in Kamloops. She's bought a home here, which is a great sign. And she's becoming acquainted with the vast portfolio that Tracy outlined. So we can look forward to meeting her today, but hearing from her in June. At item 5.4, we have the capital request update that Director Stamer just referred to. So Corey Ween, the floor is yours.
Great. All right. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to present to you today. My name is Corey Wine, and I'm Director of Business Operations and IH's Finance Liaison for the Thompson Regional Health District. I'm here today to talk about our 2022-23 capital funding request. I wanted to start the presentation by briefly speaking to the challenges we're facing when it comes to prioritizing our capital needs versus funding available. Our facility infrastructure and equipment continues to age, and we're challenged to keep up with refresh and replacement requirements. Overall service level growth, such as increases in surgical volumes, means more equipment to replace in the future. At the same time, we're facing supply chain pressures, limited capacity of trades, which is increasing our costs of equipment, materials, and construction. To expand on rising costs, I can share what we see as our projected cost escalation over the next 3 years. From the slide, you can see that for 2022-23, we expect to see escalation between 14 to 16%. Over the next 2 years, we'll see some slow improvement with things dropping to 10 to 12% in 2024, 2025. Interior Health has a number of mitigation strategies to help reduce the cost escalation impact. Firstly, careful and thoughtful evaluation of delivery model to match market conditions and the project. 2, we tender projects and receive prices for work to be done in a shorter period of time, which means contractors aren't stuck pricing potential risks down the road. And 3, we add a level of due diligence to our procurement process to consider what projects contractors are working on, their liquidity risk, and schedule of our work. In my next few slides, I'll share a quick update on some of our capital projects from the last year. This slide is an excerpt from the February capital planning project status report. Not all of these projects are co-funded by the TRHD, but it does provide a good snapshot of all the major projects happening in the region. This report is shared monthly, and it's our primary resource for informing our stakeholders of the status of projects. In terms of minor renovation projects from last year, there's a number I can give an update on. The parking lot expansion in Merritt, there's been some challenges with procurement and securing trades, but we're now moving forward again with the procurement. Nursing station upgrade at Overlander, there was some delays due to COVID-19 precautions, but the work is now in progress and it's expected to be completed by the end of the month. Fire alarm device upgrade in Merritt, that project has been completed. We also had a security camera upgrade at the Interior Adult Psychiatric Center in Kamloops. That work is also in progress and it's expected to be complete by the end of March. And then the Lillaway main entrance renovation, there's been some delays due to some code compliance issues and need for redesign, but the work's now in progress. In regards to equipment, I can inform you that we've gone ahead and made several purchases based on last year's approval. Firstly, 4 ultrasound units were replaced for Royal Inland. 2 video tower systems at Royal Inland were also replaced. We have an anesthetic unit for Lillaway, and the automated chemistry analyzer for RAH was purchased, and now just site renovation work is underway. Moving on now to the 2022-23 capital funding request. I'll go through the various types of projects we're requesting funding for, but I did want to emphasize that this doesn't include the minor capital equipment that we typically bring forward in the November board meeting. This slide shows a summary of our capital funding request for 2022-23 for major capital equipment, IMIT, and renovations. This year, the total investment in the Thompson region is $9.6 million, of which we're requesting the RHD to fund $1.34 million. This year's value is comparatively low to prior years as a result of the change in scope and budget required for the MRI project, which I brought up in the November meeting. In regards to construction projects over 100,000, there's a few that I'd highlight. Firstly, the pharmacy renovation at Royal Inland. This project was on the 2019-2020 funding request letter, but due to market and material pressures, the total project budget has increased 1.3 million, of which we're asking the RHD to fund 40% of the budget increase. The scope of work involves creating new sterile mixing within the pharmacy to meet new national standards. Unfortunately, we're having similar budget pressures at all of our pharmacy sites related to this work. 2, acute care expansion planning at Royal Inland Hospital. The 2011 RAH master program and site plan envisioned 3 phases of development. Phase 1 included internal renovations plus the new clinical services building, and that was completed in 2016. Phase 2 envisioned renovations to the emergency department and the new patient care tower, which is expected to be completed in 2022 and 2025. And the site master plan also envisioned a phase 3 that would include renovations to remaining departments requiring upgrades, plus construction of a new tower. So this request is for concept planning for the 3rd phase of this project, and it'll involve reviewing the program needs of various service areas and identifying their needs to support future service demand growth. Continuing on, we've also got the lab outpatient area expansion in Merritt. This project was on the 2020-2021 funding request letter, but due to market pressures, we have a budget increase of 187,000, of which we're asking the RHD to fund 75,000. Sorry. We've also got the humidifier replacement at Royal Inland. This project entails removing humidifiers from the 1980s that are no longer serviceable and replacing them with more energy efficient units. We've got air handling units at Royal Inland. There's 2 of them. They're both 18 years old and they're at the end of their useful life. So this project will involve replacing those with, again, new high energy efficiency units. We've also got a double door replacement in Lillaway. This is to improve security, infection control, and ergonomics. The double doors are in the operating room. The existing doors are original to the late 1950s and are no longer serviceable. Moving on now to construction projects under 100,000, we've also got the access control system in Ashcroft. So to enhance security and safety at the facility, a number of interior and exterior doors need to be integrated with the building access system. We've also got a humidity steam boiler system replacement in Lillaway. This is replacing a 35-year-old humidity steam boiler on the site. Moving on now to digital health. For a number of years now, Interior Health has regularly invested in IMIT capital to continue to advance this digital platform. These ongoing investments are a key enabler of Interior Health's ability to support health service operations, advance Interior Health strategies, improve quality and patient safety, incorporate innovation into operations in order to improve effectiveness and efficiency. The benefits of these investments are distributed equally across all regions of Interior Health, so the 40% is allocated based on respective populations. For the Thompson region, this is 19%, or 726,000. For 2022-23, the Digital Health Investment Plan includes multiple elements, including a number of major network infrastructure refresh projects, foundational investments in systems to enable the health analytics strategy, which will allow IH to better utilize its data to make better and more timely decisions for healthcare services. We've also got the continuation of the My Health Portal expansion and refresh and replacing legacy phone systems to a unified communications platform across Interior Health. In regards to equipment over 100,000, we've got the meal delivery system for Royal Inland. Interior Health is implementing the patient choice meal service model at Royal Inland. This new service model better reflects client-centered care by giving patients a choice while meeting their clinical nutritional needs. This project will replace the rethermalization equipment from 2003 and also includes renovations and associated IMIT hardware and software. We've also got middleware. The middleware allows Interior Health Labs to enhance and streamline operations through the integration and automation of repetitive tasks. It also streamlines quality control processes to ensure the integrity of lab results. This is actually an IH-wide project, which has been in progress for some time. All the RHDs have contributed a portion to the overall project already. The Thompson originally contributed 92,000. However, since the original request, the scope of the project has expanded and Interior Health entered into a lengthy vendor selection process, with the outcome being that we need a budget increase. IH-wide, the increase is 2.3 million. And for the Thompson, that amounts to 175,000. We've also got an additional med station for Royal Inland Hospital. This purchase of an automated dispensing cabinet is additional to our current inventory of med stations and helps replace manual drug distribution used within a number of departments. The MRI scope revision. During the November board meeting, I shared an update on the MRI project, with Interior Health deciding on deferring the planned replacement and instead making upgrades to the existing MRI. The RHD portion of this project has reduced from 2.5 million to 800,000. Lastly, we've got YAG laser, which is used in eye surgery. This unit is replacing a 2008 model in the ambulatory care department and supports more client-focused care. And lastly, we've got an image guidance system for Royal Inland. Similar to a GPS, this equipment creates a virtual roadmap of the body to assist surgeons. As the surgeon's instruments travel within the patient's body during a procedure, the system displays their exact position relative to the inside of the body, which supports surgeons in more safely performing delicate procedures. That's all I have for today, but I'm happy to take your questions. And again, just want to thank you all for your continued support.
Thank you very much, Corey. And just a reminder to directors, we'll be hearing from Mr. Ray about our overall budget, and then we'll be debating the equipment budget coming up in the meeting. I have Director Rice, then Director Stamer. Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Mine goes to the minor, and I know we'll be debating it later, but I just have a quick question because I think you might know the answer. First of all, and I bring this up every year, because the rural hospitals really depend on that minor capital budget under 100,000. And I'm just wondering, do you start making decisions on what you're gonna, each individual hospital has different priorities, as we know. And do you start talking to whether the doctors or the staff or whatever, and get their priorities like now, and then start looking for equipment? I'm just wondering the process when this comes out in November, how the process is to get to that point. I think it's critical now that I see what's going on with Ashcroft with and that is needed, what is on this budget that we just presented with Ashcroft, but there are other things needed, with Ashcroft, I'm sure Clearwater and other rural hospitals. And I'm just wondering, is that consultation process started now of what their, say, top 3 priorities are? And then do you actively search to see if you can find those? Because in the past, I know it's been sort of what's been available is sort of what they get. And I'm wondering if that's changed a little bit. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, our prioritization process is definitely cyclical. Every year we have a period of time when requests are submitted. So that's typically in January and February, and that doesn't differentiate under 100,000 over 100,000. All requests are consolidated, and then they're grouped into sort of into buckets. As part of that process, so there's local engagement that does happen. The under $100,000 capital equipment is actually prioritized regionally. Usually there's a local lead from every site, which I'm sure Ian can maybe speak to, but there's ongoing dialogue that happens as part of that initial capital prioritization process, but then also ongoing as we look at the list and figure out what our priorities are through the year. So it's typically a period where we have the window open for capital requests in January and February, but there's also the opportunity to bring forward emergent things if things need urgent replacement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Conscious of the time, I've got Director Stamer, Director Singh, and then Director Birch Jones. Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ween, for your presentation. 2 quick ones, if we can. Number one, we've been trying to get to the bottom of some information again on the MRI from change to replace. I mean, I think we would all agree and maybe argue that it's the most important diagnostic tool that we do have. So can you explain We aren't replacing this aging machine at this time, and not just, quite frankly, the insulting phrase of change of scope, because that's what we keep hearing all the time without even a definitive reason of why we're not looking at changing this machine. And the second part is in our presentation, we always hear typically presented. So I'm wondering why this board doesn't have an opportunity to participate when they ask for equipment from our region, from our region's healthcare. All we get is a presentation without a list of what was asked and what didn't get approved. If we saw a 3 to 5 year needs list, maybe we could participate in that discussion and possibly fundraise in our communities if we thought particular equipment needed to be replaced sooner. I find it hard to believe that Chase, Logan Lake, Clearwater, and Barrier, again, don't have similar needs than the other largest centers that were approved in this year's budget.
So first on the MRI and then on director input into the capital lists, please, Corey.
Sure. So on the MRI, there's obviously a tremendous amount of work happening on site right now at Royal Inland. So the decision was that the replacement would be better suited to happen down the road. We can do a number of upgrades to the existing unit, which allows us to better sequence the future replacement with other site works. So that's the primary reason. At the same time, we can do upgrades and still achieve a lot of the key benefits of what we would have got with the replacement. So we'll really improve efficiency and throughput, which is going to help wait times and cut down on our downtime for the upgrades is only going to be about 3 weeks. Whereas if we were doing a full replacement, it would obviously be much more disruptive to the site. So that's the background on the MRI. In terms of the engagement, I know one thing that Lisa spoke to during November was trying to stay connected with all the local leads around capital equipment. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to work on moving forward. Our capital equipment lists are quite long and lengthy. There's things that are on there that just get carried over year to year. So sharing that in a form like this is probably not the best use of our time, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to stay connected with our local leads. And I think that's something that between Ian and Lisa's teams, that's something that we can certainly prioritize.
Yeah, and I think the message from this board is that the directors want to be more involved in the selection and prioritization, particularly related to some of the rural sites. So I think that's a matter. I spoke with Director Stamer offline yesterday about this, and something that we will be talking about in June with Vice President Shendrick, as well as hopefully Lisa will have completed her discussions that she committed to with all of the members of the board independently. So Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Christian. Welcome, folks. Good morning, everybody. Just want to ask about this idea around, obviously we have legitimate concern around money from non-Indigenous housing on reserve and the 270 that we want to take out of the budget. What kind of impact does that have on the sort of funding requests that you're bringing forward? And has the province actually said that they might actually fill in that 270 in terms of funding from the province side?
So we don't have another funding source for that. So our challenge would be that we would have to relook at our lists and reprioritize. The way our cycle works is our things are prioritized in the late fall, November, December. So all of our capital budgets are now fully committed to projects. So if there was a decision to reduce the capital funding request, it would mean that we'd have to go back to our list and relook at the different projects on there and potentially remove some.
And that's coming up later in the agenda, and the letter from Selena Robinson would have indicated, at least to me, that the 40% was not cast in stone, Director Singh, and that would be something that would be up to us to lobby for the additional funds. And I believe empirically it takes the contribution of the regional district from 40% to, I believe, 38.5, something like that. So Director Ray, our Chief Financial Officer, will provide more insight on that. It's his report. And finally, Director Birch Jones.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Christian. And you did a nice summary of what I'm hearing from other directors about wishing that we could have some input into this listing at some point. I did check with the previous administrator at the hospital. I know that some of our lead people do have some input, but what I'm seeing is finance showing an incredibly strong commitment and quite a bit of money towards the surgical program in Lillaway. And part of me is going, well, I certainly hope they know something that I don't, because Interior Health has closed the surgical program currently. It's something we would like to see very much as part of a full service hospital, but we would very much like to see our full service hospital. I'm sure all the other rural sites would say the same. Thank you.
Tracy or Ian, did you want to talk about surgical services renewal in Lillaway?
Yeah, sure. I can take a stab at that one too. And so there has been a temporary closure of the site, but we plan on resuming it hopefully within the next 6 months as we start onboarding more physicians. And as we're doing that, we still need to make sure that we have the equipment up to standards so that when we do have those physicians recruited, we can bring them back in as soon as possible.
There's hopefully good news, Director Birch Jones.
Just a follow-up comment that that is very good news, and thank you. I'll remain optimistic, but not to forget that we do have that facility here, and the amount of money being spent on keeping it up to serviceable levels is fantastic, and you could use it from Kamloops or Royal Inland when you are too busy in that surgical department there.
And busy we are. Thank you. We're moving along then to item 6.3, the amendment bylaw number 157, and I'll call upon our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ray.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and I'll keep this brief because I know we're short for time, but I just wanted to review some highlights on the 5-year financial plan for the hospital district. And just as a reminder, as I've usually done in the past, I'll make sure I distribute these slides to all the directors so they have them to refer back to later. Just quickly, the mandate is generally to cost share on capital improvements and equipment. The 2022 budget is about 44.6 million. It includes a little over 9 million in debt payments, ongoing scheduled payments annually for the money we previously borrowed towards the patient care tower. Capital projects, a little over 25 million, of which just under 16 million is for the patient care tower scheduled payments this year. There's 10 million in there for provisions for new capital projects. And that basically breaks down in the previous year, we'd allowed 5 million towards a potential ask for parkade or parking improvements at Royal Inland. So that's been carried forward as part of that 10. And the other 5 is really what covers the capital request today and what might come later in the year. That's still at the typical funding level. So it does have a little bit of a buffer in there to allow for things that might come later unexpectedly. And if it doesn't get all used today, it just feeds into our reserve. There's a little bit of administration costs there too. The funding really breaks down as taxation of 16 million and change. That's as has been our strategy for a number of years, adding 1.5% to the previous year's taxation. It requires pulling 10,600,000 out of our current reserves to balance. And we have 17.6 million carried forward in surplus from previous years, much of which goes towards the capital projects line above. The difference between the patient care tower and that 25 million is really the carry forward of commitments for requests that were previously approved that we haven't paid money out for yet. As I said, it's a 1.5% lift to the taxation from last year, which amounts to 239,000 or so. The breakdown, I just provided it for a little more clarity on that 25 million, just under 16 million for the patient care tower. 9.5 is the carry forward of commitments for projects previously approved that we haven't paid for yet. And then the 10 million is broken up there between the parkade and the allowance for new requests. This is just a summary of the patient care tower budget. No real change there. We had borrowed money, about 128 million in 2018, and invested it in some GICs that provided us with a good return on investment. Those GICs have all matured now. We still have about $62 million in cash, most of which is invested in higher interest earning savings accounts and money market funds. Of that 62 million, 41 million is earmarked for the future payments for the patient care tower, which that's the graph. So here in 2022, you can see the 15 million goes up a little bit to just under 18 million in 2023, and then reduces. So by 2026, it's down to zero. So the cumulative amount, including this year's payment, would be 41 million. And the rest stays in the reserve and begins to grow again towards future projects. It's basically showing in about 10 years time, it would come back up to about what it would be at the end of the year today. That's if we don't actually have any future commitments for future projects, which isn't necessarily the case. And this is a quick slide that I wanted to show, just what if we were to skip the 1.5% tax increase this year, what would the impact be? And it has a progressive impact on the reserves, where it remains a 1.5% difference. So it grows over time. So future projects that may be coming, we've talked about the beginning planning for phase 3. I don't really know what the future ask is going to be. The last time we had discussions around price. It's hard to put price before planning, but it could be in the $100 million range, another major renovation project. There's potential need for a replacement long-term care facility that could be in the $50 to $60 million range. The new parkade, we've already allowed $5 million towards. So there is a need to grow those reserves and position ourselves to be able to fund those future costs as well. And that was really the intent behind adopting that strategy. The 1.5% tax increase per year was to position us to provide for those future things. In terms of the assessment shifts this year, that's the breakdown of the converted assessment in each property class this year versus last year. As you can see, the percentage in the residential class has grown, whereas it's decreased in the other classes, so that essentially all other things being equal, residential taxpayers would be paying a greater share of the taxes this year compared to prior years. And that's all driven by the BC assessment valuation. It's not based on decisions we make. This is based on the completed roll, which was published by BC Assessment in January. They are due to release the revised roll, which will include updates through their appeals process that take place in February, March. It was actually scheduled to be out, the last update I saw was scheduled to be out yesterday, but it hasn't actually appeared yet. I think it will come out today or the next few days. But as usual, it always comes a little too late for me to provide to the board. But when it comes to the actual tax requisition, it is the revised roll that we will be using. The total change in assessment is almost $7.9 billion, which is more than a 25% increase year over year. I have never seen that large an increase all in one year. For a comparison, in 2021, the overall increase in assessment was 6%. 830 million or so of that is non-market change or new construction. most of which was in the residential class. And if we were to continue to apply the 2021 tax rate, that would end up having the effect of providing roughly $473,000 in new tax from that new growth. Which would offset the 1.5% increase that we're actually requesting. You can see the vast majority of the increase, though, is in the market adjustment. 90% of that, 90% of the overall change is due to market costs, not the non-market change. And of that, 93% was all in the residential class. And that's part of what's pushing the greater portion of the taxes to the residential sector, because the whole system is designed to tax where that value lies, and more of it is lying in the residential class. There's the comparative tax rates to raise the taxes this year versus last year with the assessment change taken into account. The average assessed residential property in the hospital district this year is a little over 488,000 versus 384,000 last year. And with those tax rates and the tax requisition comparatively year to year, the average valued property at 488,000 would be paying $166.63 this year versus $159.09 last year. That's a $7.54 increase, of which $2.39 is reflective of the 1.5% increase in the actual tax requisition. The rest of the increase is all driven by those assessment changes. So that's my presentation. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Not so sure I like your schematic with the operating table there, but first of all, I'd like to thank, and I hope I don't embarrass Doug, but for moving us to a 5-year financial plan, which I think really provides a little predictability in terms of the situation. And for those of you who are also members of the TNRD, I think some of those slides we're going to see later on today in terms of growth of the role, because it affects us all through the budgeting process for the TNRD as well. Questions of Mr. Ray? Director Stamen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Ray, thanks, Doug. I just have a question. What happens? I'm not an accountant, but what happens if after listening to Mr. Ween's presentation and we're seeing a drastic increase in some of these expenditures, instead of plugging in a 1.5% model, what happens when we double that? Because I'm not entirely comfortable with the way that graph is coming down and then we're hoping it's going to come back up again. I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen with all the contributing factors that are occurring. So what would be the input if you double that? I'm not suggesting a 3% increase in taxes this year. I'm not suggesting that, and please don't quote me. I'm just wondering what happens if we start plugging in some of those numbers similar to what Mr. Weens is suggesting. What happens to that downward curve and then back again?
Doug?
It's a good question. I haven't actually calculated that out, so I would need to apply a little bit of time, and I can certainly provide that information to the directors.
This, if I may supplement, the reason I'm suggesting that is we're going into surpluses. So I'm a little bit nervous of going into surpluses to pay something else when all of a sudden we could end up having a very substantial tax bill somewhere down the road because we didn't plan ahead of time because of some of these increases in the expenditures. So I'm just wondering what that would affect our overall budget if we started plugging in some more realistic numbers that seem to be occurring.
Yeah, and I can certainly put together some information for the board on what that would look like. The pieces that are still missing, again, we've received some information over the short term over what IHA believes the inflation will likely be in the next few years. Over the longer term, I know the Bank of Canada and the Canadian government usually meets and sets targets for overall inflation at about, and they just renewed it again last fall at a long-term 2% target, and they set their policies to try and achieve that. The higher inflation we're seeing in the short term, they still believe to be a short-term impact, but it certainly does, set the bar higher. And so knowing what that long-term impact is going to be hard to take into account in those projections. And the other thing, although I've put some information, potential dollar impacts for future asks from IHA, I don't really have any firm numbers from them. They're still doing planning for phase 3 and so forth. So the big unknown is what we're going to be asked for.
And I think to that point, Director Ray, we've got the commitment of this board when we took office to increase the budget by 1.5% throughout the piece. If the research is available for our June meeting, then the next board could look at whether or not that's an appropriate number. I'm not an accountant either, Director Stamer. I would have just said that the red line that you saw would be a blue line just equally above that if you went from 1.5 to 3, but apparently Doug adds a little more rigor to my calculation, which is a good thing. Other questions of Doug? Director Rain.
I just thinking about this proposal. I mean, we're talking about things we're going to purchase in the future, services in the future. But when we borrow and we advance all of these surpluses today, we're asking the taxpayers of today to pay for the services of tomorrow. And, I appreciate that that's been a very conservative approach and it's been effective because it's reduced that big hit that we might have had to have borrowed, $100 million plus. But there's still this other discussion that taxpayer would come back with to say, why is the taxpayer today paying for the services of tomorrow? Are they really going to get those benefits? So there's a counterbalance to this. And I would say to date, Mr. Ray has been very conservative. There's debt with the hospital has been well managed. I think I don't see the need at this point to panic. Although it may be coming. If the forecasts of Mr. Wien are correct, the 14% inflation, then there's a hell of a big difference between what the federal government thinks inflation is going to be and what Royal Inland thinks inflation is going to be. But I think we need to cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, and to the slide where we show debt repayment of $9 million, given it's my signature at the bottom of the $127 million loan, I'm glad to see there's some repayment in there, but that's going to be a long-term commitment. Further comments before we entertain the motions? Seeing none, is anyone prepared to move recommendation 1? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Brown.
Second, yeah.
Thank you. Discussion, please. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. Thank you. At recommendation 2, is there a mover? Moved by Director Crow, second by Director Gillis. Discussion, please. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, those opposed, that is carried as well. And finally, at recommendation 3.
Move recommendation 3.
Moved by Director Schaefer, second by Director Quinn. Discussion, Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to point out that this is our last opportunity to speak, particularly on the discretionary part of the budget. And I'm hoping that if some of our members are in the same position as we are a year from now, that we have a little bit different circumstances in determining that secondary budget. Because otherwise, my vote may be different next year than this year, if I'm so fortunate to be here. Thank you.
Point taken. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed, that is carried. And thank you, Mr. Ray, for your comprehensive report. Moving to item 6.2, the major equipment and renovations bylaw. Mr. Ray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in your report, you'll see the request that Mr. Wine spoke to earlier in his presentation. The 40% of the funding for this request comes to $3,074,800. They've netted off the reduction in the commitment for the MRI off of that to come down to their 1.3 million. We're treating that separately because in the 2021 bylaw, we had the original amount approved for the MRI. And so we're treating that, it comes up next on the agenda as an amendment to that bylaw to reduce our commitment under the bylaw that original approval was housed in. And so we're treating this request at the $3 million level and keeping the two separate, although it gets us to the same place. The other thing in our request, as was brought up earlier, or in our recommendation, was to reduce the amount being recommended to the board by $270,000. And I don't know if the chair wants to speak towards that, but the essential gist of it is, as we've talked about in the past, that there's a bit of an equity issue where there's non-First Nations, non-band properties that are currently contributing property taxes towards these grant funds to the IHA that we feel creates an equity issue for those taxpayers who are contributing and having to make up the difference. And again, that letter that we received back from Minister Robinson, suggested that the 40% that we've traditionally funded is not legislative required. It's a matter of negotiation. And as has been brought up in the past, this is kind of our opportunity for negotiation. We don't really get involved earlier than this point. So the recommendation has been that we reduce the amount of funding by that amount of tax that we're estimating that we're not receiving from those subject properties. But of course, that consideration is completely up to you.
Thank you. And Director Ray talked to myself about this prior to, and do we exercise that now or later? Director Gillis and I met with Selena Robinson somewhat 3 months ago, and then we kept you apprised of the correspondence between us and the ECHO report or letter back from her. It was my thinking that, well, this issue is fresh in her mind, and she has a commitment that 40% is a nominal amount of contribution. We want to jump on that and adjust the minor or major equipment budget accordingly at this juncture, and have IHA use that as leverage with the minister to get that extra 270,000. What's your pleasure with respect to the recommendation?
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Director Stamer, seconded by Director Brown. Discussion, please. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All of those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. Thank you. At recommendation 2.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't have my hand up.
Director Singh, go ahead.
It's just about the negotiation end of it. So it's not really us negotiating that, it's actually the IH folks negotiating internally to get that money, because essentially we're not negotiating, we're just sort of saying we're not paying, as far as I can see here. And I guess I kind of wonder about the idea of, like, is this the right time? I mean, it sounds like quite a blunt instrument that just withdraw the funding, given the needs that we have within the region for all these pieces of equipment. And Mr. Wine saying there's no actual other source of funding for these things at this time. Negotiations with the province typically take some time, as we all know. And so I just kind of wonder about the strategy in terms of kind of like, it's almost like basically putting, a very, very stark negotiation strategy forward here. So that would be kind of my sort of initial thinking about it. But obviously that's just my own thinking. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that it's a bit of a blunt instrument, but it's, in my opinion, a question of equity across the taxpayers of the regional hospital district. And that was the issue driving that. Further discussion, Director Rain.
And what is the strategy on the bigger issue? I mean, we're paying 40%, and I know my colleagues over in Whistler, I don't think they pay 40% on any of that. When the taxpayer sends me a copy of taxes in Whistler and taxes in Sun Peaks, he says we've been overtaxed in Sun Peaks by significant amount. When I look at it, one thing that sticks out immediately is hospital. Is it not time that I hear the Lower Mainland continually talking about they need more grants, more federal grants for transportation and all of these things. They originally got off the hook on the 40% because they were funding transportation. Now they're looking for the rest of us to fund the transportation, and we're still stuck with the 40%. I mean, some point we gotta, I like this little negotiation, but there's a bigger one. Where is the equity in the 40%?
Yeah, to your point, Director Rain, there's a bigger negotiation looming. The point Director Rain is referring to is that Lower Mainland municipalities contribute to TransLink, but not to hospitals. And recently there has been some movement on the 40% commitment with Mills Memorial Hospital in Terrace. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to really assert the notion that this 40% needs to be revisited in terms of the contribution that local taxpayers are making to what is essentially a provincial responsibility. What's your pleasure with respect to recommendation 2? Moved by Director Duty, seconded by alternate Director Sarai. Discussion, please. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. Thank you. And recommendation 3? Moved by Director Quinn, second by Director Gillis. Discussion on that one? Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, just to reiterate, I'm a little bit disappointed in the way that the information on this, this change in scope was brought to the board's attention. And I'm hoping that it's true that, yes, by putting a new MRI in there, they don't have the room for it. It makes more sense to do it in the future, but I'm hoping that we can probably replace that equipment sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. And you and I are of like mind in terms of delaying replacing a roof. Sometimes is a faulty strategy, but I think in this case, we can only rely on the medical imaging expertise that they've provided, and that has been their recommendation. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question on recommendation 3. All of those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. Thank you. At the amendment bylaw, this refers to that issue. Mr. Ray.
Yeah, conscious of time, this is simply acknowledging as an amendment to that bylaw, the reduction in the commitment that IHA is providing. And as has been said, this still intends to be replaced at some point in the future. So I'm sure it will come back as a future request on another ask at a later time.
Thank you. Is there a mover? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Kershaw. Discussion, please. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. At 2. Moved by Director Quinn, seconded by Director Weeb. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. And 3.
Second.
Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Kershaw. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, contrary minded, that is carried. Thank you. And finally, under reports, the financial disclosures information. Mr. Ray.
Yeah, this is the annual statement of financial information for the hospital district. It's prepared according to the guidelines set by the province. Not much of a change from previous years. We also have a separate report that's also included on boards and committee, and that's the one where you actually see the breakdown of the remuneration for each director on.
Moved by Director Rain, seconded by Director Elliott. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, those opposed, that is carried. Thank you. There was no new business to come before the Regional Hospital District today beyond the tour that we're going to take. Our next meeting, as we discussed, will be in June. There'll be an additional meeting this year. Mr. Hildebrand, you had a comment.
Yes, Chair Christian. There's a brown bag lunch in the meeting room just down the hall to your right on your way out. The bus is here. It's just parked on 5th Avenue adjacent to the building, and it will have you back here by 1:20 or so for the next meeting.
Thank you. Let the record indicate we are adjourned at 11:29.